Hey, hi everybody. Thanks for joining today. I know it's a Saturday. Everybody wants to rest, but whoever's joined, thanks for coming. So today, in this chapter, we'll be talking about empathy and inclusion, and I have Dakshdeep Singh from People Strong and Dev Kiran from Schneider Electric join us here. Thank you both so much. I'd like to kind of give a few words about both Daksha and Dev, and then I'd also want them to introduce themselves. I know Daksha and Dev Kiran from my past, where we had a learning, I would say, a leadership learning journey through Jombe, and that's how I met both of them. Both of them are amazing HRs, and I think they've been also um, appreciated for a lot of their brilliant initiatives within their own organizations. And Div Kiran especially won the 40 under 40. And I think recently also she won the Taipai HR Leader Award. Daksh has, from being a HR generalist, he's moved on to becoming, or I would say he's gone to the other side of the table where he is telling people how to transform HR and really bring a lot of digitization into workplaces. Um, Thanks both of you for joining. I'd love you also to go ahead and give a quick introduction about yourself so the audience knows. Daksh, do you want to take a
Sure. Thanks, Meena. Hey, everyone. So I've been into the HR world for now more than a decade now. It has been a ride for me managing the processes, the technology. I've been on both the sides. When I say both the sides, it's typically being the HR for the people and then coming on to the other side of the table. That's where you go ahead to the customers, which are again your HR as your customers, and then you actually work them across with the tech solution. So that's where I am today. I am with People Strong, going strong for the last 6 years with them, and managing the entire international geography for People Strong. So that's a quick brief about myself. Happy to have you guys out here. And I'm sure we'll be able to throw in some great insights about from our experiences on how to drive in empathy and inclusion within the organizations.
thanks, Daksh? How about you, Dev?
Hey everyone, my name is Vipkiran. I think Meena already spoke a lot about me, so I'm just going to keep it short and say that I've been around in HR tech and transformation and now purely HR for almost 15 years now. And I think this is the time when HR is in kind of a spotlight, especially this year with a lot of work that has been disrupted due to pandemic. And I think that's a great topic to start with because this year again this is one topic that has been in the spotlight and one of the topics that has differentiated uh, organizations from each other, whether it's for good or for worse. The brands have been differentiated based on this as well, so very happy to talk about it. And I think also very interesting for me because I'm actually almost meeting online everybody after 1 year, because I remember last year we all got together and discussed great stuff, and then this year we didn't really get a chance to meet each other. So it's also a great opportunity for me to meet Daksh and Meena again.
Thanks, Dev. And I think we also had slaughtered some more folk, but they couldn't join for whatever reasons. We truly miss them. But I think next time when they join, you can hear it out from them. I'm sure they have a lot of meaningful practices that they want to share. But today's topic is all about empathy and how does empathy really drive inclusion, right? People want to know if empathy can really bridge that diversity and inclusion gap. Can empathy be that yardstick for us to weed out bias in the organization? What does empathy really mean, and how does that really improve inclusion in the organization? Is something that I want to really listen from our speakers today here. Um, so in that line, I wanted to quickly ask them a few questions. Um, I really wanted to start the session with a lot of ice breaking and all of that, but I know we know each other and we've spoken to each other. So I want to quickly dive into something that is that's going to be a takeaway for the audience here. So I want to understand from you and Daksh and Dev, what does it mean? What does it mean by when you say there should be empathy in the organization. What does empathy really mean?
So I mean the typical thing when I first heard this word on actually the first time actually I mean you on a serious platform, that was during my MBA times, right? It was the definition, the typical MBA definition that was given to me was stepping into somebody else's shoes. Right, you used to obviously make some fun about it. I mean, obviously you can step into somebody else's shoes. If the size fits in, it's yours, right? So all these comedy things used to happen across on a lighter note. But then, looking at today's scenario, wherein due to this overall pandemic, there is, I mean, at least when the pandemic started across, right, for the first 3 to 6 months, there was a lot of chaos within the organizations, and the HR had to step up uh, actually and change a lot of things in the way they work even today, right? So looking at that thing, so it made them all the more, it made it all the more important to ensure that how do you understand the thoughts, the feelings, and the perspective of the employees, all right? How do you ensure that people I mean, that people are able to work cooperatively along with each other. Perhaps they could have different experiences, different preferences, different styles, different opinions, right? So that's what empathy is. Somebody who's able to relate to all these things is still and can still make it possible for people to work together cooperatively. I think that's how it is, and I think empathy is not. It's no longer a soft skill that people talk about. I think it should be called as something as a business skill in today's world, right? That's not something as a soft skill that people should know about. So I think that's a differentiator, and I think one critical thing. I mean, it's something. I mean, it's also something that helps you build and sustain a lot of positivity in the workplace, specifically in the workplace relationships, or perhaps even foster diversity or inclusion, right? And yes, so that's what is diversity from my end. That's what is the empathy from my end. Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Daksh. Dev, do you want to add
I think,
some?
yeah, for me, and thank you, Daksh, for reminding me that, we started this word with, when we were studying. And for me, interestingly, I come from a marketing background. And their empathy was not used as a soft skill. Even at that point of time, it was an extremely important skill because you have to build products that you sell to your customers. And how do you sell to your customers? When you create an advertisement, or when you create a campaign, or when you create a product, you should know how your customer is, like, really feeling. What is this emotion felt by the person you're targeting as a customer, or we used to call them target audience, right? Uh, and then, of course, the same concept being used inside HR circles for feeling and connecting deeper with, your teams and with your organizations on the HR side as well. So I think empathy really is being sensitive to what other person is feeling, what your colleagues are feeling, getting on the skin of another human being and see the world through their eyes. I think Daksh also mentioned, like, walking in their shoes, right? It's really about that, and it's extremely important as a, I would say, skill today. This is a trait that I think all great leaders should possess. Some this year are even calling it the creme de la creme of all leaderships, I would say, traits. But this is really, really to put yourself in the shoes of others and to understand what other people are experiencing. I feel that, in fact, I would say not just leaders, I would say in any field, whether it's HR, whether it's marketing, whether it's financials, any field where you're more empathetic, you may be more effective at fostering, even diverse and inclusive workplaces, and um, ensuring that, the work is done with the high level of emotional quotient there. So, because empathy is, again, very important part of the emotional quotient that everybody is talking for about more than, or emotional intelligence that everybody is talking about these days. So I think it's very important to do that. uh, I would also like to touch up on a little bit on the types of, I would say, empathy that is there. If you've heard about it, there is effective empathy and there is cognitive empathy. Those two especially because they matter in the HR context. I think for emotional empathy, it's the capacity to respond with an appropriate emotion to somebody else's mental state. You listen and you respond in the right way. And cognitive empathy is the capacity to understand their mental state and their perspective. So they're slightly different. I think these are the two things which we really should talk about when we talk about empathy and inclusion. Because I feel on this particular topic, if you're not empathetic, it will be really difficult for you to understand and accept other people. And if you can't do that, inclusion and diversity is pretty much not possible.
Totally, totally. I totally resonate with that, Dev Kiran. Just about, I think last week I was talking to one of my friends. Okay, she works as a scientist in a very very big established oil company. So there, I think just an example of how empathy sometimes in the world has been conditioned to see as a weakness, right? Sometimes people see that expressing genuine concern and understanding is or being compassionate toward people is usually observed as something that's not really pulling you towards your achieving of big goals. They see that something that will pull you down, right? So when I was talking to her, she was telling that she's a senior scientist in this company, and then she's responsible for a lot of cost cutting and a lot of ensuring some roadmaps are really put in place and all of that. And when she was talking to some of the juniors in her team, she's been slightly upfront and putting her foot down, telling, I need a ETA for this, I need a deadline for this. Why don't you guys come to me with a proper roadmap on when we can finish things. So she was just trying to push things, slightly being demanding. But what in the contrary happened was her juniors went to her boss and told that she's been super demanding, super bossy. I can't work with such people. Okay, and what do you expect the boss's reaction here? Right? Should he come back and ask the person what happened? Right? Instead, the boss is coming back to her and telling, "I hear a lot of negativity, spreading around you. I think you should take a step back, not be so demanding. Do not, kind of." From your angle, you're a woman. You need to know how to behave and all of that. So for me, after listening to this, I was taken aback. I think a lot of people even today do not understand that first show concern, earn the trust, and after that you can always investigate as to what really had happened, right? So in both
Yep.
scenarios, with the junior and with this lady, the leadership person, whoever it was, should have basically asked an open-ended question to learn what had happened. Instead, not take decision that okay. And I also see in such situations a lot of hit is because the people have a lot of unconscious bias. They kind of believe that if certain people are, or if women are doing this, they are being bossy, they are being dominant. So it's a lot of mixed emotions in their mind. It comes out, and being compassionate, empathy takes a backseat. For me, it's clearly like Dev Kiran told, it's high emotional quotient is so much required for people to feel included in the organization, for people to voice out, for people to feel
Mm.
belonged in the organization, right? So if the person had only told, I'm here to hear, let me know what happened. So listening is so much important than making that first judgment.
Absolutely, absolutely true, Meena. And this reminds me, and I'll put it very shortly, on Jacinda Ardern's interview that she did with, I think, BBC or some other news channel, and she talked about empathy in political leadership, and that line sticks with me. That it takes strength to be an empathetic leader. It's not easy. So we are not born with all the skills, right? Some people are naturally high on EQ, the others are naturally high on IQ. But just like IQ, if you practice a lot, you can improve your intelligence, you can improve what you're doing with the learning and application of that knowledge. And the same can be done with empathy as well. If you feel you're not as equipped with it as somebody else is, it can still be built. And definitely being authentic and putting yourself in someone else's shoe and hearing them out definitely is the first step to that.
Totally. Thanks, Devan. think this really gives us a good understanding of what empathy is. I'd also want to see if anybody from the audience wants to come and give their 2 cents about what they understand empathy is. You can, guys, you can feel free to raise your hands. I'd love to bring Sharat or Kunal, who are totally into empathy and wellness as a business. So Kunal raised his hand is coming. Hi, Kunal.
Hey, hi, Tina. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for coming, Kunal.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Great to hear. Thanks, Lakshmi, for this program.
I think your voice is a little choppy though.
Is it? Okay, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little better.
Is it better now?
Sure. Go ahead, Kunal.
Yeah. I have an interesting observation. Rather, I think I think there is a fair chance that when leaders try to practice empathy, that what we end up doing is being sympathetic to a director,
Ah, I see.
right?
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so while I would also like to hear what Dakshdeep and Vivek and you, tend to think about it, but it's so easy to just be sympathetic with the individual, and you are coming from a position of strength then, and you don't really know whether you're connecting with the individual, right? You might be thinking that you are emotionally connecting with them, but you could actually be coming from a higher position, and the individual then thinks that, okay, he's trying to belittle me or down upon me, maybe because I'm in an emotionally weaker situation, and that gentleman, in an emotionally stronger position. Uh, so I think that connection is very important, whether it's verbal or non-verbal. And I know it's so easy for us to speak and very difficult to practice. But I also wanted to hear your experiences around how you've tried to be empathetic and whether you've thought about the angles of being sympathetic while trying to be empathetic.
Very valid question, Kunal. People can misunderstand empathy for sympathy, and things have gone wrong as well. I definitely would love to throw this question on Daksh and Dev. Daksh, do you want to go first on what your experiences are? Daksh, you're on mute, I suppose.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I was saying, I mean, as rightly said by Kunal, yes, people tend to confuse sympathy and empathy, right? While having those conversations across, and that comes just because of the mere fact that people think it's the same thing, right? I mean, people somehow mistake in terms of what's empathy, what's sympathy. But I think when it comes to the role of HR, see, when it's sympathy, I mean, your friends, your colleagues, I mean, obviously they can show that aspect, that what you're going through, they'll be simply just patting on your shoulder or just giving you a hand to say, no, fine, things will move on fine. But then empathy is a lot more about it, right? When you say that, so I mean, at least in my experiences, the way we manage, I mean, the way in within my organization, the HR manages in case of either crisis, I see a lot of EQ taking over the IQ aspect, right? So if that's where the EQ takes over the IQ, that's where the person becomes more empathetic rather than being sympathy oriented for an individual, right? So examples like when there is a concern, right? The person actually going across to say, I mean, somebody, I mean, from a small gesture of greeting people authentically, right? By saying hello, at least from your true will, not by the mere fact of saying somebody is just crossing by doing it, right? And then it's about creating that sense of safety that we try and do for the employee. So despite of all these things that have happened in the pandemic, at least we ensured as an organization that from the day one we entered into this lockdown phase, we gave them this sense of positivity that boss, we are there for you. No jobs are going for a toss. You're still there. Whatever may happen the entire year, we are not going in for a job loss, right? So that's a sense of safety because you realize what the employee is going through, right? There are people who are being laid off across the organization. Companies have let go of people. Smaller companies have shut down, right? And at least those sense of safety, bringing in that, understanding their perspective, how do these people feel? Because in the end, the organizations are driven by employees, right? So if these guys don't feel secure, if these guys don't feel empowered, the work doesn't get done, right? So that's one side of it. That's how we did it on this side of it. Secondly, we at least ensure that whenever there is an employee concern that comes across, there are forums with the leadership as well as with the HR, wherein it's the employee that has to say, and the job of the other person sitting on the other side of the table is to actually listen and carefully listen, and then engage with that person to understand as to what's the challenge that he or she is facing, and then be able to still suggest or perhaps link to their ideas, thoughts, or perhaps feeling, and then give them a 360 view of what is the neutral perspective of that thing, that at least ensures and tells the person that in case there are any misunderstandings or any disagreements, that get solved, so there are no biases that are taken into consideration, right? And people ideally have been given that free hand to say, even if you feel that you are somebody or you have been excluded, that's the forum, go ahead and talk, and that leads to a lot of positivity across the organization. People start feeling that yes, I mean, the organization relates to me, the organization wants me to walk along with them, and that's how the organization, and that's what drives the overall focus and the vision of the organization for us.
Very rightly said, Daksh. I think that driving some of those inclusion initiatives while giving the feeling of safety is so much important. It's the most imperative thing, at least in the pandemic that we've seen now. What's your take, Dev?
I completely agree with Daksh on this, Meena. Creating that safe space where people can come and be themselves is extremely important. That's the first step to starting the culture, or sowing the seed for the culture of empathy. And for us at Schneider, also that's a big deal. That's part of our values, where we allow everybody to be themselves every day. And I would like to give you an example on in terms of empathy, and how we can really use that. So empathy and sympathy, rather, that's the question, right? So we talked about that. So empathy is really understanding the person, like Daksh said, and it's really tapping into your own experiences to feel what the other person is saying. It's really to say, I feel your pain, rather than what Ashok said, and then trying to be bossy or senior about it, and saying, I'm sorry that you are in pain, right? So just like when you get a maths problem, we look at, what's the formula? How can I use the formula to solve this equation? I think that's exactly what empathy does for your emotional state. You look at what you have gone through in past or experienced in past, and try to see how you can connect with other people, tapping into emotional experience, and that's where empathy comes in. And again, empathy doesn't happen in one day. If I acquire a new team today, they're not going to trust me from day one, but by listening to them, by trying to understand them, I can slowly build that culture that they feel safe uh, to share things with me, or in general with the whole organization, without feeling intimidated, or without feeling that they are being pitied, right? So it has to be empathy done right, and not just empathy being done.
Totally, totally. I understand that, Kiran. I think just a quick example, right? In my previous place, there was one person who was diagnosed with a critical illness, right? If the leadership wanted to feel sympathy for that person, they would go around telling people that, you know what, this person's having some critical illness. I feel so sad about it and all of that. But just because the person chose to be empathetic about it, he told that there are several ways he can support. He never told this critical illness to anybody, so that they don't look at him with the lens of pittiness, right? So I feel taking some decisions and acting upon how to improve the situation is more empathetic, and just not just understanding that person's situation, and then it's not like you want to sit with them and cry for them and show that pity. It's all about how to improve the situation and how to support that person in the organization, for them to feel it's okay to have whatever issue they have and still feel safe within the organization, right? So that's amazing. Thanks, Daksh, and thanks, Kiran, for your inputs there. We'd also want to touch upon a few points here on what behaviors do you think really improve inclusion? What are those aspects of empathy? What are those aspects of being compassionate that actually improves inclusion, and what does not? It will be great to hear if there are instances that you want to share. Dev, you want to go first?
Sure. I think I would list it out in, five behaviors. I think first is absolutely important to be authentic, right? Like I said, it has to be done right and not just about acting to be empathetic. So you have to be authentic. Communication is vital, especially during a crisis like this, right? We need leaders who are authentic and genuine. So being authentic, if whether it needs to be sharing more information that people need, or being transparent, like Daksh said, in our organization also, when we had this pandemic, everybody was worried about what's going on. Will we lose our jobs? Will we have pay cuts? Will we have some other repercussion? What do we do? So that communication part was very effective. We were doing one newsletter a day, which was not the case earlier, specifically targeted for COVID, special coaching for, managers to, what they should be saying, what is actually happening in the organization, not really hiding it from anybody, giving them comfort that their jobs are not going away. We had some adjustment policies as well, and making sure that those policies are conveyed correctly to everybody. So being authentic is definitely one. Another one which we talked about is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, right? And to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and to look at any dilemma or any problem or anything you are trying to solve from multiple perspectives is one of the most important things for leaders, especially in the organization. So put yourself in someone else's shoes. Not making impulsive decisions and not being judgmental about a situation too soon. So really listen, think from different perspectives, and take your time to take a decision, right? So um, this crisis is an, I would say, made everybody emotionally high, right? The pandemic has made many people feel anxious, stressed. It's very uncertain, right? So they're all valid and important. I would say they are valid and important emotions, right? So, but at the same time, they don't need to be used to make impulsive and rash decisions. So, uh, that's very important. Don't make any judgments. Don't be impulsive in your decision. Another thing which I think we often miss is that while we try to be, let me use the word, not empathetic, but trying to be nice to others, we forget to be self-aware, right? We are not in touch with our own emotions. And I think that is extremely important, because when you're in touch with your own emotions, right, when you take some time to tell yourself that it's okay, you're doing fine, and give yourself a little bit of emotional leeway, you learn to do that for others as well. So I think being in touch with your own emotions and being nice to yourself is equally important. And the last one I would say is talk to people, talk to your team, talk to everybody else who you work with. Learning about other people from different cultures, from different countries, from different teams will help you learn a lot more about them and become open as well, because that's giving you a chance to walk in other people's shoes. So for me, that's those are the five.
Totally. I think I resonate so much with that, Dev Kiran. I think being authentic and genuine, being transparent, communicating openly, listening actively and not be judgmental and be self-aware. These 5 points make so much sense. And I think this reminds me of one instance that happened. Surprisingly, there was a bunch of team members who would constantly talk to me saying, I don't feel like talking to my manager. I have so many other concerns. I want to come to HR and talk and all of that. So I saw a pattern of such instances happening. I went to that manager and asked, what is that you're doing, right? People don't seem to be so happy. He told, no, I'm such an open and transparent person. I empathize with people. I on the floor go and tell, look, my team members, I'm so open. You can come and talk to me anytime you want. I'm always there to help you. I'm always there to support you. And yet nobody comes and talks to me yet. So he feels that he's being absolutely open and transparent. He wants to listen to people, but nobody comes to talk to him. But instead, they're coming to the HR and talk, right? Then I went back to the team and asked, what's happening? Why you're not talking to your own manager? He's being so open. They were like, Mina, he says he's being open. He comes to the floor and says, I'm open, I am transparent, and he goes into a cubicle and sits in shut doors, right? So that made a lot of sense. So the guy is, I mean, it's about, we ask people to be humble, but you can't go and tell everyone that I'm humble without demonstrating what you're being, right? You can't be telling people and sitting in a cubicle in closed doors and say that I am open and transparent. So I felt that, yeah, it's about, yeah. So such behaviors are a no-no, and leadership kind of assumes they are being extremely good. They are empathetic. They are open to talk to people, but nobody wants to come to them because they don't want to talk to a person who's out there only trying to brag.
Yeah, I think it's about walk the talk. So, and I'll give you an example of one of the leaders I work with. This is a very prominent HR leader in our organization, and they have a day and about 30 minutes fixed in their calendar every week to walk on the floor and just talk to whoever is around. I think that's a great example of walk the talk, that I'm not just saying that you all be open, empathetic, and inclusive, but this is how you can do. And that's why I think I will keep repeating and I'll keep saying that it's not easy to be empathetic. It takes effort.
Totally.
I
Yeah, go.
agree. I think the important thing out here is even to people, I mean, for people to have this feeling with them as to what inclusion is, right?
Hmm.
I think that's where people lack. I mean, because they don't know what it is. And I was just speaking to Meena the other day. I mean, generally on the same thing. Whenever we talk about this DNI, people figure out only the D part. The
True,
I is always left out
true.
somewhere or the other, right? So, and people simply say it's about diversity, diversity, in the entire topic goes into the same world of diversity. Nobody figures out how do you bring in that inclusion, be it how do you drive that sense of belonging, how do you ensure that there is a feeling of respect or a value that is seen, that the employee sees for himself as that individual, right?
Hmm.
Or perhaps a level of supportive energy that comes across, or perhaps commitment from the leaders within the organizations or from colleagues around to say that how those people are individually and how perhaps collectively they can drive the common vision or the common mission of the organization. I think when people are sorted on this side of it, I think obviously there could be different initiatives as five things that they've talked about. It's about, and in the last question itself, I mean, I touched upon certain things, right? I mean, you have to be a good listener. Just go ahead, listen to them, understand their thing. I mean, work for a common good or a shared success. Lean into the discomfort, perhaps, for that individual or the challenge that that person is facing, or even perhaps put your stake in the ground, right? When somebody is facing something, it's good to be saying that let me go and face that situation rather than just being sitting and listening. Put yourself on the ground, right? I mean, these are certain things that organizations and a lot of people or organizations which are very people centric, right? And organizations who thrive actually on people and they really feel that people are their biggest assets, they do the same practice day in, day out. I mean, you create forums, you have leaders who doing walk the talk, people are there around. I mean, even if I talk about the person whom or the team whom I work with, let's say, even if I take an example of Pankaj, who's the founder and the CEO for People Strong, I mean, you can't have, I mean, he has a whole set of responsibilities with him. Despite of everything, he ensures that once a month he speaks to the entire leadership team, which comprises of 80 odd people. So we 80 odd people who manage the organization. He ensures that once a month he speaks to us, and it's a non-official talk even. It's a talk at a personal level. He tries to understand what's the problem, be it at a personal level, be it something within the office. The concerns are actually spoken. I mean, the employees can just go ahead, vent out to them. He'll still assist you out. He'll still understand. He'll ensure that then the culture that the organization provides you, understanding that concern, actually corresponds to the same action. I mean, I have had my own personal instances wherein I've just gone back to them to say, I mean, that's the situation that I'm going through. And the organization has just assisted me in the next 6 months. and immediately starting from the next day, to ensure that how, by knowing those situations that I'm going through, what best I can do, still, I mean, keeping my productivity at the same level. That's what the organization should focus out to, right? Rather than saying that's a policy, we can't help, you have to work 9 to 6. Even small things like working flexible hours, that's as good as driving. That's a very important thing, and that's how people we are doing it right nowadays. This is one simplest example of driving inclusivity. If you focus that your work to be done, you're not haphazarded in terms of no, you need to be in at 9, you need to be out at 5, and all that stuff. That's how you drive it. That's about how you give that comfort to an employee to say. So let's say, and with this pandemic, at least say one good thing that has happened is a lot of women which were out of the workforce, right, due to one way or the other, either due to maternity thing or due to their other responsibilities, and perhaps anybody else, they have got a lot of scope out here and they have come back into action, just because organizations have started realizing that it's the output that they have to focus upon and not perhaps the way of reaching that across. If the person wants to work, perhaps if the person is not okay working at 9 o'clock in the morning, that's fine, log in at 11 o'clock. But if you're still able to deliver that output, that's how you understand that individual. You understand that yes, there are responsibilities, people are working from home. I mean, people who have kids, obviously they have to manage their kids, the kids classes are also going on, and that's how companies can support. So these are these small initiatives, right? How well do you touch base with those employees? How well do you understand them? How well do you transform your policies in terms of supporting the employees, and not just from an organization standpoint? I think that's one key thing that people should know, that policies are made for the employees and not for the organizations. I think that's a mindset shift that needs to happen. People create policies for the organization, but the policies have to be for the employees. The way they would be the most productive, that's how policies should be done. And I think these are just small things that people can do to do it.
Totally, Daksh. I think that's amazing. Couple of things that you've done in the orgs to improve inclusion. Dev, do you want to share any best practices, that you have in the current or the past that you have kind of initiated to improve inclusion?
Well, a lot actually, especially if I talk about Schneider, because every year, I think one of the things is that there are a lot of awards that are being won. And the good thing is that, like Dakshdeep said, it's not about just the window dressing and the lip service. It's not just about the setting up some sort of policy. It's also about how we execute that policy and ensure that it is employee centric. So I think one of the examples that we have is our global family leave policy, right? It's very very inclusive. It's I would say one of the top differentiating factors that even employees look at when they want to join Schneider per se. And this family leave policy allows you, no matter who you are, it doesn't take into consideration your gender, it doesn't take into consideration the condition that you have, whether you're having the child naturally, whether it's adoption, whether you are a father, whether you are a mother, whether it's a IVF child, whether it's a surrogacy child. Everybody is entitled to take those leaves. It doesn't matter which culture, which country you belong to. It's a standard, same policy across. There is no need to inform the larger audience if you feel that you don't want to really talk about certain things with everyone. Your manager is obligated not to talk about it to everybody. It's your leave. You take it the way you want. So I think that global family leave policy is definitely something that supports diverse needs of all our people. Like I said, no matter who you are, where in the world you live, or how you manage your unique life and work, this will allow you to be at your best. And then the second thing I could use as an example is the pay equity at Schneider Electric. So there is a proper coverage that is done every year when there are global salary reviews, and whenever there is a your performance reviews that are being done. And at this point of time, we have developed a pay equity framework covering 99% of our global workforce. So this is looked at every year by the CHRO herself, and by the top leaders to ensure that this is reduced as much as possible. Again, doesn't matter which gender you are from, doesn't matter which global region you are from. It's a parity that is fixed for anybody who is not at that parity on an yearly basis. I think those are two examples which stand out in my mind for Schneider after having worked for so many other organizations.
Sounds good, Dev. Daksh, do you want to give any examples of any best practices?
Sure. I think two parts. I mean, one for sure, I'll share something that we do within the organization, and some of I mean, being a part of the other side of the story, wherein I act as a partner to a lot of organizations. Even Schneider is one of them. So when I do that side of the part, I mean, there are certain things that though we do, and we also the services that People Strong offers, that also assists in driving a lot of inclusion on that side. So I think from a People Strong standpoint, if I talk about, I think I mean, these are small initiatives, though 5 or 6 initiatives that we have done. One is obviously time off for family or any medical issues, right? That come across. We have a specific leave aspect, and that's given only from that's not a part of your sick leave or not a part of your annual leave. That's on top of it to say in case you need to just take care of your family, right? I mean, in today's scenario, that's something that's one. Secondly, there is 100% flexibility in the working hours that we have started off, and it's available across levels. The only consideration here is in case it's a customer facing work, just ensure that you are there for their time, but then you are free to manage your own work and deliver it as per the customer satisfaction. We have a recognition platform. I mean, we call it as Zippy out here. That's a conversational platform that we have similar to a WhatsApp. It has a small thing with respect to rewards and recognition. So a lot of times, what happens is people, what we have seen, and even if you go through certain surveys, people generally tend to reward the same gender. I mean, I was reading it somewhere in one of the surveys that was done by Sherm, I think last year sometime, and it came out quite evidently that a male manager generally tends to reward somebody male, and a female generally tends to do the same thing. And that was quite a healthy number coming across to say somewhere approximately 65% or 70% of the people actually have noticed the same behavior. So at least the way we do it is we manage it via the tech platform to say, I mean, there are recognitions that could be done online. Go ahead and do, even if somebody has done even smallest of the things, go ahead and the person starts accumulating those reward points. And when you do their performance reviews, you actually take a lot of these things that have gone across, a lot of these recognitions that have come across, just to be unbiased, right? The person has done an achievement. Another thing out here is, at least when we do, and it's again a very small thing that we do. But while we are hiring, we ensure that a lot of personal information is masked. So when the HR shares the profile with me, for an interview, I just know the name, and in some cases, not even the name. The profile is given to me, and I have been just asked to go ahead and interview. So, as I don't have any clear bias that comes across within that person, a lot of personal information. What I just get to see is the job. I just get to see is the objective of a person, the experience, and the journey that that person has had. Not to know the date of birth, not to know whether the person is single, married, whatever is the case, none of that information is shared. Apart from another thing is the phone number, because I have to call that person out. So these are the things that we do, and that's one way. I mean, these two examples are another couple of ways wherein the People Strong Tech Solutions even assists the organization in driving it. So in case people just go out for it, I mean, you can have the Recruit platform which can actually mask this information just to ensure that you are an equal opportunity employer, you don't bias across things, and you can have these small initiatives of going ahead and doing rewarding and recognizing people and promote the entire visibility across the organization. One more last thing is I think it's important in this thing to have the voice of the employee. We have forums within the organization. I mean, one of the examples that I took from Pankaj's example that I was talking about, but there are formal forums we do on every 2 weeks basis. We call them as Soham days, wherein that's a forum which is called as the voice of the employee kind of a forum. So in case there are any concerns, the entire leadership team, starting from Pankaj till the minus one of Pankaj, attends that, and people are just free ahead to just speak about their concerns. And the intent of that forum is by the end of the forum, the concerns are answered and are sorted. So that's the way we drive it. That's the way we drive inclusion across within our organization.
Yeah.
That's
I
brilliant.
just want to add, Meena, I think that's a very important point that Dakshdeep brought out that, as we become more digital and start depending more on technology, it's very important to make sure that the same diversity, inclusion, embracing different values are passed on to this digital transformation that is happening as well. And like Dakshdeep said, I also recently launched an open talent market internally, and it was consciously built into it, especially because it's using AI, and that's the future, right? To one, ensure, we work with Gloat as a platform for this, and they've ensured that, everything is masked, similar to what Dakshdeep said. Because it's internal, you can still see the name and email, but even phone number is up to you to give or not. It's really about your skills, and not really about whether you are a woman or a man or from India or from US or whatever is your gender. None of that. And on top of that, there is also an importance of fixing that bias in case it creeps up. Because I was talking to one of the managers, and they were really worried about AI, and they came up with some example and said, what if the system starts showing me only male profiles or only female profiles? And I had to like really explain it to them in detail about how AI learns from people. And I told him that for all profiles, if only male or female profiles are being shown up, then it's AI learning from human behavior. So it's not the system. You need to fix the behavior inside the organization in that case. So, but at the same time, it's extremely important that you brought up this topic, both of you, because digital is the way forward. AI is the way forward. If we do not consciously build the practices of diversity and inclusion in our systems, we'll continue to grapple with these problems even in future.
Just to add on to that, Dakshan, this just hit me right now because when you're talking about recruitment and really bringing that inclusion element while masking a lot of information, but there is a deeply rooted emotion in Indian companies that they want to look at always the tier one colleges and institutes. Do you even mask those information?
The product allows you to do it, but then people would want to understand what the person has done. I mean, sometimes, okay, this was one great example. So when I joined People Strong, this used to happen, and it's true for any small startup organization. And this I'm talking about 6 years back. Uh, and you pick up any small startup organization, you'll find engineers being IITs, and all the MBA grads being some of the IIMs, right?
Yes.
So you actually pick up that lot. But then we actually, so when I was there, and I think couple of years down the line, I saw this practice. I mean, it led to a lot of productivity loss also. I mean, we were unable to attract talent, we were unable to have people. They had different set of expectations, and not always they were great performers as well. We did that analysis in terms of how performance has been going across, and it is 4 years now back. I mean, sometime into 2016, if I talk about it, we took that call of saying it's enough of looking at the college thing. By the time the product didn't used to support this masking kind of a thing, but we said it's enough of doing it. We just check out the skill. Let's evaluate the person on his talent, and that's how we go ahead. And if somebody, let's say, if somebody from a tier B kind of a college or a tier C kind of a college is perhaps the topper of that college, or perhaps is still able to demonstrate what we want to pull out in our job, let's go ahead and hire him. You may be able to have a better retention rate for him rather than somebody whom you're hiring from a tier A B school, or an E school as well, and that person may not be that competent even. It's just that brand that you are just following across. And thankfully we made that change. I mean, 4 years back we made that change. Obviously we have old timers who are still from those colleges and stuff. And obviously, no biases against these colleges and people. But it's about, again, it's about the person's talent and not that brand anymore. It's like the same thing, right? Even when I passed out of my B school, for example, for the first couple of years, people asked, right? From where have you passed? From where did you do your HR? From where did you do your MBA? I think couple of years down the line, I mean, after that, people just go, what's your experience? What can I deliver?
Hmm.
That is what matters. So people now today don't even know, perhaps, apart from my LinkedIn profile, or if I share my profile somewhere, only then they'll get to know from which B school have I done my MBA from. I mean, apart from that, they'll just not bothered. What they're bothered is what I can deliver to them for their business, how the organization can see me being a part of them and see the organization growing with whatever talent I have. So it's anyways, you realize actually this with time, that these things are not important, but somehow colleges or the companies actually make it at an entry level, make this as a
Mm.
filter criteria for themselves, which ideally leads to a lot of I mean, they actually let go of a lot of great talent which they could have actually used and utilized across for their own work as well.
Yeah, and from an HR perspective, I think, Meena, I've had this conversation a zillion times because my husband is an IITian. So that's our favorite topic every time we meet, and especially in startups, because if I am from IT and I'm starting something of my own, I would prefer, do a cut on that sort of a cut from institutes. But I'll bring in, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I will bring in their perspective as well for everybody to understand, since we're talking about inclusion and empathy here, right? And their perspective is that there are so many people who apply for that job. How do you make an easy cut and know that this is person who will put in some effort, because that is what it takes to get through some of these institutes. So I think for them, because there are so many competitors, people who apply for the same job, it's an easy way of saying, okay, this reduces it from say 1,000 to only 200, and I think that's what they are doing there. But on the other front, as a part of Schneider, and as a part of an organization in HR, I don't necessarily agree with it, and that's what we did. So when we built our open talent market with Gloat, we made sure that education is not a part of the AI algorithm that is really discovering candidates for you. It was purely focused on the skills and the experiences. And even in experiences, it's not about which company you've worked with. It's not about whether you have 10 years of experiences or 20 years of experience. It was more about what you learned out of the job that you're doing. I mean, you could be a recruiter for 10 years, but you still do not really know what the hiring manager needs. So it was more about the experiences that you have gained from the job and the skills that you possess. So it was a conscious choice, and I think that's where it's very important, translating those policies and translating what we want to achieve to actually do it on ground. I think Dakshdeep said something like, actually being on ground. I forgot the phrase, but yeah, even for policies, we need to do that.
Totally. I think I look at it with a lot of awe because it's amazing to see that a lot of organizations are right now moving away from a lot of traditional thought process and mindset, and moving into a lot more progressive ways of looking at hiring and then belonging and inclusion within the organization. I know for a fact that nowadays it's even Google for in the last year I heard is coming up with policies where it doesn't necessarily have to be that the person even has a degree, right? If you're able to pass your hackathons, you have a job, right? I
Yeah.
think equal opportunity has really taken better and more progressive shape as the years pass, and I hope that remains. I definitely agree with Dev that a lot of people from coming from tier one institutes have put in a lot of hard work. It doesn't necessarily mean a lot of people outside there also lack that kind of a commitment, right? I've seen that IITs, for the fact, I don't want to, I'm not trying to bias, or I'm just saying facts that I've seen in the past, is they would come and they want to be in the job for a year or two to learn for themselves, because they're always in the lookout for the next venture that they want to start, and not necessarily wanting to learn to contribute back to the organization. So that is one gap that I see, where a lot of non tier one institute folks really have that passion to come and contribute. Maybe it depends on organization to organization what they want, but definitely opening up to be equal opportunity employers is one of the best practices that's pretty much evolving, and most of them are adapting. That's great to see. But I think just before we wrap up this session, I also wanted to kind of share some of the practices I've seen that has really worked best. I know that there have always there's been a lot of talk about uncapped leaves, absolutely no bias in leaves, amazing rewards policy, equity, and all of that. But beyond that, I thought there are a few very small initiatives, small best practices that really make a difference to people when it comes to telling them that we trust you. We see you as someone who belongs in the organization, and we see you as we want to create this environment which is psychologically safe for people. So one such one such best practice that we do at Airmeet is we have two Slack channels dedicated for one for people who can just come and put that they are not available, right? It's about trying to tell them that yes, we have a lot of freedom in terms of because we are a remote organization, we're fully remote, we are absolutely distributed from day zero. Not necessarily that pandemic pushed us into being remote. Just to develop that trust in people and really involve them in our day to day activities, and for people to understand that it's important to empathize with people. There's a Slack channel where they can just go and say that I'm not available today. Maybe I have a headache and I can't join in for the next couple of hours. So we saw once we opened up that Slack channel, there's so much of involvement of people who or people who want to participate and tell others, keep people informed that they're having something else to do, but not necessary that they're trying to slack off their work. Right? The tagline of that Slack channel is clearly freedom with responsibility. So you have the freedom to tell that you're not available, but at the same time, you have the responsibility to get your job done whenever you're available, right? So I think that really built a lot of empathy within teams, a lot of trust within teams, because in remote environment, it's very easy for people not to tell that they're not available and just be in the hideout, right? So this practice really bought in a great culture where people are okay to tell that they're not there. Another channel which we have is an anonymity bot. We just included that on our Slack channel. It's out there for anybody to ask any tough question to anyone. Right, builds in a lot of inclusion and fosters a lot of accountability with people. Right, because if there is something you want to go and question, and you have all the freedom to do that being anonymous. I think these two really stood out for me as a best practice at Airbeat. And I think in the past also there were several best practices, but these two small things really adds and shapes the culture of the org. So having said that, I would also love to see if anyone from the audience want to join and also kind of talk about any best practices that they've seen has really worked well for them. Anup, Devansh, anybody wants to join? You can raise your hand, or I can even invite you to the stage. Or you can also go ahead and write on the chat if you have any questions. All right, so we have Anup asking a question here. Do you think education experience gaps are the most used metrics by recruiters simply because they might not have enough contextual knowledge on the needs of the hiring manager? How do we improve that? Daksh and Dev, do you want to take a cut at that question?
Yeah, I think I can talk about this from our perspective. In Schneider, it's the other way around. The enforced policy is to make them part of one of the programs that we have for returning mothers or people returning to work. And I would say it is in a lot of other organizations as well. So educating your recruiters and running programs where these people fit in, and can be a part of that, makes a lot of difference. So uh, you would find the other way also, right? There are people who complain and say, why can I not get this job? Why is it this only for a returning mother, even though I am a fit? So you'll face those issues as well. But I feel to get to a level of equity and get to a level of parity, you need to provide the people who are joining the workforce, whether it's be a mother or it could even be a father or anybody, right? You need to provide them the right platform, the right programs. And we do run those programs where, somebody who's had a gap can come and work, or, we are looking for jobs which are targeted for mothers coming back to work. I think that's the way we handle it. And of course, I would personally say that um, it's very important to be transparent, to communicate, and be empathetic. As long as you're doing these three things, the culture will slowly change, people will slowly learn, and so will be the recruiters. I feel actually they are good recruiters, are actually very open to understanding why this is being done and what is the requirement of the job, and they're actually able to tie things together and bringing the right people from those communities and groups.
Totally. I think traditionally a lot of recruiters are conditioned with that, right? What education and experience did you acquire, and I'm going to search only for that person. I think a lot of organizations are now maturing. They don't want to just
Right.
limit themselves with just education and experience. They want to open up a lot of avenues for people from different variety of experiences or variety of backgrounds, because they want to really create that global inclusive environment, right? Like you said, working mothers,
Mhm.
mothers with gaps, people who've had gaps because of family issues, physically challenged. I think those are all becoming a part of really creating a diverse organization. And I think it's no more becoming a big issue with at least some of the mature companies who want to shape up a great culture and tell people that they have a better culture and better purpose in the organization than just the work that they do. I think such organizations are totally coming up with a lot of better ways to
Yep,
handle
yep.
this.
And Meena, just to add to that, I think one of the upcoming trends of the future is the skill being the currency of HR. I think as we transform to that, and as you know, if you read a little bit about Gen Alpha, I would really encourage you all to read about Gen Alpha, who's going to hit the work floors in probably another 3 to 5 years. These are the people who were probably born in their 2010 onwards, right?
Hmm.
That generation is not anyways going to be focused on going to IIT, IIM, or a Harvard. They are the ones who like to experience. They want to try a lot of new things. And with those people, these bars that we have set up for those generation, they'll not work. So if we don't change, we'll not get the good talent in another 5 years. So in any case, all the companies will have to change. They'll have to shed those biases, and that's the only way to get the best talent that you have in the market.
Totally. I think we're seeing live examples of that, right? If you're able to crack a hackathon, if you're able to demonstrate your skill you're in, no questions asked,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Sounds. Daksh, you have anything to add there?
I think I'll just start from a tech perspective. Yes, people are changing. I think when there used to be a time when recruitment used to be too much recruiter driven. I think we are
Yep.
working across in an industry now wherein the organizations are even taking a call that recruitment ideally is a business function. It's the business need. Why don't you have technology which can be just handed over to the business because they know what they need, they know what kind of a candidate would fit in. But
Hmm.
somebody, obviously, what they would not be able to assess just could be a discussion that the HR does on the fitment perhaps side of it, just to ensure that there is a parity that is maintained and stuff like that. But if you just ignore the fitment aspect of the entire recruitment cycle, the entire power generally gets driven via a tech platform which can help you reduce the biases as suggested by Anoop on the chat window, right? So I simply go ahead and say that that's what I mean. I really don't bother whether there is a gap. It's fine even if there is a gap. Let me evaluate the person. If the person is still good to go, I'm done. And all these products obviously are supported by an AI engine, right? That will give you some sort of
Mm.
predictability index. And that's what that predictability index gets matured across as and when you start using the product more and more. And people can see differences, right? To see whether how many of those people that the AI bot actually suggested. Let's say the AI bot suggested that these are the 50 applicants that are perhaps suited for your job. Let's see the conversion out of it. If the conversion percentage is good, let's perhaps then go back and use some sort of analytics to understand how many of them had a gap, and do it as a present hand information to check it out whether it's working for you or not. And perhaps the way the industry is doing it, these gaps don't actually matter till the time the individual is able to act which he or she possesses. So I think this is something which becomes out critical in nowadays, even while driving inclusion, to say what's your inclusion index that's running across, or even perhaps for the organizations to understand that that's the data, right? I mean, you can't just have myths across running and flowing. It's better that you have data basis which you talk. And if the data coincidentally says that it just doesn't make a difference, then it's better you go for it until unless you have a hardcore or proven fact that you have with you.
Well, that's a great thought. I think if we have to summarize, it really boils down to two things: really looking for capability and intent in the candidate, and building a business case against some of those biases using data.
Totally, totally. Sounds good, Dakshan Dev. I think this conversation's really evolved into a very mature conversation, starting from understanding empathy to inclusion to now how to really build that inclusion while being an equal opportunity employer. So it's been an amazing conversation. Thanks both Dakshan Dev and the attendees for making this conversation more meaningful. And I hope everybody are happy with what you can take away. If there's anyone wanting to come onto this stage, do feel free. We might want to wrap this up in the next couple of minutes. We are definitely shooting more than time. I'm sure others have other engagement. So let's try and wrap it up in the next couple of minutes. If anybody wants to raise hand. I'd also want to invite Devansh from Nova to stage just to say thank you to them. Hi, Devansh.
Hi, Meena. Hi, Daksh. Hi, Devkiran. This session was like fantastic. I genuinely didn't uh, I didn't knew that empathy is such an important topic, and what the large organizations like yours is doing to help folks in the organization. Thanks, Meena, for the invite.
Totally. Thanks, Devant and Saransh, for fully sponsoring and partnering for this event. I'd love to see more events coming forward. Thanks,
Absolutely.
everyone. Thanks, Daksha and Dev, for being an amazing speaker today, and everybody else who joined. I just wish you have a magical, amazing weekend, and also amazing holiday, time coming up. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you so
Meena.
much,
Thanks,
Meena.
guys.
Merry
Thank
Christmas
you.
and Happy New
Have a
Year to
great
all
day.
of you.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.